listing and the walls that fall. Some collapse with a crash. Others rot from the inside until one morning they lean, then disappear. And sometimes a wall is pushed by people who never show their faces. This story begins where the equator meets empire, a place once called the Belgian Congo, a land carved not by rivers or tribes, but by European ink on foreign parchment. In 1960, it was declared free, but the chains weren't gone. They were just less visible. June 30th, 1960. The capital, Leopoldville, is draped in banners. Trumpets sound. King Baudouin of Belgium stands beside a young African man in thick glasses and a modest suit. The cameras are rolling. The king calls colonization a civilizing mission. He praises King Leopold II, the very man whose reign turned Congo into a personal slave state, where hands were cut off to meet rubber quotas, where millions died uncounted. The young man steps up to the microphone. He wasn't supposed to speak, but he does. Real quote, "We are no longer your monkeys," he says. "We are not beggars. The independence of the Congo is not a gift. It is the result of struggle." His name is Patrice Lumumba. He's 34. And with that one speech, he made enemies in every capital that had smiled at him days before. The West called him dangerous. Moscow called him promising. He called himself simply a servant of the people. But in a matter of weeks, the dream began to list. Congo had no army of its own, just a shell left behind by Belgium. The soldiers mutinied. Belgian paratroopers flew back in, claiming to protect white lives and investments. Then came the split. Katanga province, the mineral-rich South, declared independence, backed by Belgian corporations and political forces. Congo's lifeline, its copper and cobalt, was suddenly in enemy hands. Lumumba, still only weeks into office, pleaded with the United Nations. "Help me hold my country together," he asked. But the UN stalled. Behind the scenes, the Americans and Belgians worried more about his closeness to Moscow than about the Congo itself. That's when the whispers began. CIA Director Alan Dulles called Lumumba a Castro type, a threat to Western interests. By August 1960, President Eisenhower had reportedly authorized his removal. Not defeat, not arrest, removal. Mobutu Sese Seko, then an army colonel, barely 30, was given support and money by the CIA and Belgian intelligence. Lumumba's own military turned against him. In September, Congo's President Joseph Kasavubu, pressured by foreign advisors, announced Lumumba was dismissed. Lumumba rejected it. The government split. The streets filled with fear. October 1960, Lumumba tried to flee to Stanleyville, where loyalists awaited. He never made it. He was captured by Mobutu's troops and put under arrest. The United Nations refused to intervene. The press called it a matter of internal order. And the boy in Leopoldville, the one watching foreign men arrive in black cars, saw new uniforms patrolling the street. Flags changed. Faces disappeared. A portrait of King Baudouin still hung above the post office, cracked and swaying, but no one looked at it anymore. The walls were listening. They said it was over, that the danger had passed. But nothing was over, and the real danger was just beginning. He was no longer prime minister, no longer free, not even safe in his own country. But Patrice Lumumba still had his voice, that they couldn't arrest. So they chose something else. January 17th, 1961. A convoy moves through Katanga under cover of dusk. Inside, Lumumba is bound, beaten and nearly unconscious. His hands are tied behind him, his shirt soaked with blood and sweat. The men around him laugh in French and Flemish. Some wear the insignia of the Katangan gendarmerie. Others wear no uniform at all. One of them is Gerard Sout, a Belgian officer sent by Brussels. He carries no flag, only orders. The jeep stops at a secluded house outside Elizabethville. There is no trial, no audience, just 3 prisoners: Lumumba, Maurice Mpolo, Joseph Okito. Each was a government official. Each would be silenced tonight. They are taken into the clearing. They are shot, one by one. Their bodies fall without ceremony. But this is not the end. What followed was not execution. It was erasure. The bodies are taken, hacked apart, dissolved in acid. The men pour sulfuric acid into a barrel and stir with sticks. Later, they grind the bones. One officer pulls a tooth and pockets it, like a souvenir. For decades, no one knew. Officially, Lumumba was killed by enraged villagers. That was the story told by Belgium, by Mobutu. Even the United States played dumb. Files went missing. Testimony vanished. And the world moved on. Mobutu Sese Seko, once Lumumba's aide, was now dictator. Backed by Western governments, he ruled the Congo for 32 years. Elections were replaced by parades. Critics disappeared. Fortune flowed outward. Copper, uranium, diamonds. The Congo bled quietly. And in Europe and America, those who had signed the orders retired, gave lectures and wrote books. But history has a taste for unfinished things. In 2001, Belgium finally launched an inquiry. It confirmed what many already knew. The Belgian government was morally responsible for Lumumba's death. They said it carefully. Morally responsible, not criminally. No one was arrested. No one stood trial. And then came the tooth. In 2016, Gerard Sode's daughter admitted in a TV interview that her father had kept Lumumba's tooth in a box. It had passed from drawer to drawer for decades. Yellowed, still intact, the last piece of a man who had once stood before kings and called for justice. In 2022, 61 years after the killing, Belgium handed the tooth back to Lumumba's children. They wept. The government bowed. But the wound did not close. Because a tooth does not explain betrayal. It does not restore a future that was stolen. And it cannot speak the names of those who signed the cables, moved the money, or watched from afar as the fire was put out. Powerful line. They killed Lumumba not because he lied, but because he told the truth too early, too clearly, and too black. And for that, they didn't just want him gone. They wanted him forgotten. But rivers remember, and the people remember. And in the silence that followed the gunfire, the world began to ask, what else have we been told to forget? They buried no body, no casket, no grave for mourners to gather. But Patrice Lumumba did not disappear. His face would rise again, painted on walls in Ghana, Angola, South Africa. His words were whispered in prison cells, carried across borders in song, in speeches, in silence. He had been prime minister for just 12 weeks, but what he stood for, true independence, not just a flag and the anthem, but control over resources, voice, and destiny, that lasted far longer than they planned. And that frightened them, because the Congo was never just another African country. It was the key. Its ground held uranium that helped build the atomic bombs dropped on Japan. Its copper powered Europe's cables and America's cars. Its rivers could float armies, and its people were never meant to rule themselves. In the eyes of those who believed they owned the map, Mobutu ruled for decades, drowning the Congo in vanity and violence. But when he finally fell in 1997, the country didn't rise, it fractured. A war began, quiet at first, then unstoppable. It became the deadliest conflict since World War II. Over 5 million dead. Foreign armies came and went. Resources were looted, and still no reckoning. No courtroom named those who had lit the match in 1961, the men in the shadows in suits who had stirred the pot, then stepped away before it boiled. But history, like dust, always settles in the lungs of those who breathe it. In 2013, President Obama stood before the African Union and called Lumumba a hero for the ages. In Belgium, a few museums began to rewrite their labels. Statues came down. Apologies were debated. But is that justice? Or is it just cleanup? The truth is this. The world conspired to silence a man whose only crime was believing that his people should own their future. And that truth should make us all uncomfortable. Because if we can erase someone so visible, so loud, so loved, so right, then who else have we erased? What happened to Patrice Lumumba wasn't a Cold War mistake. It was a choice, made by real men, in real rooms, with real consequences. And the echoes of that choice are still heard today in the mines, the markets, and the millions who live with less so others could gain more. So if you've heard this story for the first time, don't let it be the last. Share it, teach it, name what was done, because silence is what let it happen. And silence is how it could happen again. History doesn't just live in books. It lives in us, and we are responsible for what we choose to remember.